Okay guys, Timmy coming at you again. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you the rule of 9's when it comes to patients who have burns. If you recall when we talked about the skin, one of the huge functions of the skin is to protect you from bad stuff, right? It's your best protection you have against infection. So one of the things that physicians and nurses worry about when a patient has a burn is how much of that burn accounts for the total surface area of the body. And that's where they developed the rule of 9's. And as you can see here from this little diagram, what I want you to understand is this, is, for example, the head. If you have a large burn on the head, that's 9% of the body. Burns that cover the entire torso, 18%. So 18% for the front and back. The arms represent 9%, both front and back. So the front part of the arm, 4.5, back part of the arm, 4.5. And then again with the legs, an entire burn of, let's say, your right leg on the front represents 9% of that total body surface area. So if you add those up, front and back, each leg represents 18% of the total surface area. Now, why is that important? Well, if a person has greater than 10% of their body burned with a second-degree burn, more on that in a little bit, then that person needs to be transported to a burn unit where they specialize in that care. Because one of the things that happens in people who have large burns, greater than 10% of the total body surface area, is they're left open to infection. And basically what happens within the first 72 hours, if they don't die from hypovolemic shock or lack of blood volume or loss of blood volume, then they will die from septic shock, massive infection. So that's why it's critical that you understand that. So just real quick, and again, this isn't a a pathophysiology class, but what I would like you to understand is just the difference in the types of burns and how they're graded. A first-degree burn means that the epidermis, and remember that the only living layer of the epidermis is the basal layer of the epidermis. So this will usually produce, it's like a sunburn, right? Typically, it may be a little painful. It's not that bad. You get a little redness, maybe some blistering. The second degree burn, on the other hand, is probably the most painful because that is damage to the epidermis and the dermal layer. And if you recall, the dermal layer is where you have the pain sensation, touch, right, pressure. So these burns tend to be extremely painful. And then the final is a third degree burn where there's destruction of all three layers and there's actual physical charring, burning, burnt parts of the skin. And the area in the burn is not painful. And the reason for that is that the nerve endings that transmit pain to the brain have been destroyed. So, but however, the surrounding tissue is. And when you have dead tissue, that dead tissue has no way of protecting itself from bacteria, and bacteria love dead skin. So now you have open access to your bloodstream and you have no defense in that area, and that's why bacterial infections are one of the big things that happen to people after they've had a large burn. Is the bacteria enters the blood and it circulates all over and you end up with sepsis and die. So those are the rules of 9. So if you work in an emergency room and a person has a burn that covers the front of their legs, that's 18% of their body, and that person is probably going to be transferred to a burn unit where they can care for that burn, because the thing that's going to kill that patient the fastest is the lack of that skin. So if you also recall, one of the functions of the skin is to keep moisture in the body, keep fluid in the body. And if you've ever had a really bad sunburn, right, not only you get dehydrated very, very, very rapidly, and that's because you lose that fluid as a result of the destruction of the skin. So that is the rule of 9's.